This is a real little people struggle when. It was viewed by 1 million people and gave it a 9.2. There are netizens' angry praise. This is definitely one of the loveliest movies I've ever seen. The film not only received critical acclaim, and once it's released, he has been nominated for several world awards. Many famous scenes have been mentioned over and over again. The film is based on real people, based on Chris Gardner's autobiography of the same name. It is worth mentioning that the two stars in the film are a real-life father and son. The film is about a single father who is down and out, having a hard time raising a son alone. An inspiring story that eventually became a well-known investor, except for the healing element of kinship. It is also one of the best inspirational films in the history of world cinema, a textbook for the workplace. The story takes place in 1981 in the United States. Economic crisis hits. The streets are full of homeless people and the frames are sad. A black man sits in front of the TV, watching the president deliver the economic report on the news. Unemployed at home, living on his wife's meager salary. Not only that, Chris put up all his money. Invest in medical treatment equipment projects. It didn't sell at all. Poverty drove his wife to the brink. Working double shifts for 4 months straight. The treatment of Chris was no better, you know. It's either swearing or making sarcastic remarks. Rent, taxes, kids' tuition. The burdens of life are like mountains. Chris is close to breaking down. He began to wonder, does happiness really exist in this world? Until one day, Chris passed through a magical place. Everyone had a happy smile on their face. He couldn't help asking,
what do you do and how do you do it?
I'm a stockbroker.
Stockbroker. Oh.
The desire for happiness took hold of him. Chris is never empty. I want him to bring his resume and apply for an internship soon. But his degree is too low. Be turned down. Chris was relentless, staking out the office floor every day. He finally succeeded in waiting for the personnel director. I thought I'd just hand in my resume and get my chance. But still nothing. Chris didn't give up. He continued to sit outside the office. Once again, he waited for the personnel director. To get a chance to sell yourself, he pretended to be on his way. Finally got up close and personal with the director. After getting in the car, Chris talked a lot about himself. The director turns a deaf ear and focuses on the Rubik's Cube in his hand. It was all the rage at the time. Looking at the clueless supervisor, Chris knew this was his chance. He swore it. Promise to put it together before you leave the car. The director smiled sarcastically. But soon the smile vanished from his face. Chris quickly put one side together. The supervisor couldn't take his eyes off him. The driver can't help but look back. Destination arrival. Chris also successfully solved the Rubik's Cube. The director gave him a meaningful look. Chris soon realized something was wrong. He couldn't afford the $17 fare. There's only one choice and that's to run. Even if you keep apologizing. The driver showed no sign of letting him go. Chris managed to escape before the subway closed. But unfortunately, he lost his expensive scanner. A series of blows hit him low. To make matters worse, his wife was leaving him with their son. Chris accused his wife of being weak, and insisted he would not be allowed to take his son. I just brought my son home. The landlord issued an eviction order. Chris asked him for a week, painting the walls for free in exchange for work. Finally came the turning point. The supervisor called Chris. It was as if he had been saved from drowning. The day before the interview, Chris is painting as promised. The police suddenly came to the door. For being too late with the fines, he was called into the Orange for tea, even when Chris begged. Still in custody until tomorrow. He had to ask his wife to look after his son. But here's the bad part. The interview that changed his life. The very next morning, Chris just got released. There was no time to change clothes. He ran all the way towards the company. All that awaits him is the unknown. The interview gathered some of the biggest names in the financial industry. If you pass, you'll be paid $80,000 a month. The man was scruffy. Not only the gray face but also the paint. The personnel director who recommended him was extremely embarrassed. The expressions on the faces of the leaders present were wonderful. Sure enough, the interviewer tried his best to make things difficult for him. Men use their ingenuity to solve it perfectly. But, a disgruntled interviewer won't let him off the hook. The ultimate killer.
What would you say if a guy walked in for an interview without a shirt on? And I hired him. What would you say?
The man was silent and then quickly responded perfectly.
He must have had on some really nice pants.
The humorous answer finally amused the interviewer. The man passed the interview. But the interviewer told him the 6-month internship is unpaid. Feeding the family became a fatal problem. Chris struggled inside. Still don't want to pass up this great opportunity. He was determined to make a name for himself. Then came the bigger blow. The landlord kicked them out. Father and son moved into a shabby hotel. Chris's internship has officially begun. The standards are very strict and it's not just about performance. And the final test scores. Only 1 out of 20 interns can stay. He had to work 100 times harder than anyone else. Arrive at the company earliest every day. Too busy to even drink water. It's more about being black, being bossed around by a corporate boss. He made sales calls to drive sales. Being scolded for no reason is a daily occurrence. Then one day Chris called a big client. He was told to be at the meeting place in 20 minutes. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. However, his boss has reappeared, asking Chris to park the car for no reason. He had to agree. It turned out to be too late. Chris was undaunted. China brings son to visit client or...
What are you doing up here?
I came to apologize for missing our appointment the other day.
Oh, you need to come up?
Oh no, I just wanted to take this opportunity to say thank you for your time. I know you probably waited for me.
Clients are impressed by his sincerity. Invite father and son to the ball game. Chris was ecstatic. Even if it doesn't work out. But I was exposed to the rich world. Got a lot of contacts. The god of happiness finally visited him, but new doom struck again. Tax arrears are forced to be paid. The balance of the card clears instantly. Chris was once again destitute. To make matters worse, the medical equipment also malfunctioned. It won't sell. Father and son can no longer afford to stay in a hotel. Chris, who is homeless, has no way out with his son. Walking aimlessly to the subway station, Chris looked at his son curled up on the bench. A flood of guilt came over me. To make my son happy, he pretended to scan a time machine forever. I played with my son. Overplay. His vivid performance aroused his son's interest. It is this rating. Happiness in life is more precious and moving. The man is in a hurry, only to be stopped by an old man with gray hair. The old man asked him to borrow $5. The smile vanished from the man's face. He dug out his wallet and looked at the few banknotes in it. It's a pittance to someone else. But men who are down and out, every penny has to be counted. But he's homeless. I can only sleep in public toilets with my son every night. Grab a shelter bed with the homeless. The Great Depression of America. The bottom of the heap is everywhere. Because the homeless man suddenly cut in line, Chris couldn't stand it anymore and they got into a scuffle, about to be kicked out by the shelter social worker. Thankfully, there were good people who testified for Chris. Just a homeless guy cutting in line. Father and son are finally in a shelter. Chris puts his son to sleep at night. I stayed up all night fixing broken medical equipment. Even when you're exhausted, he still reads and studies by the light from the window. Such a life is almost unimaginable. The final examination finally arrived. Colleagues are still busy writing. Chris has turned in his papers and walked out of the exam room second. Faced with arrogant overachievers, his expression of modesty. The essay questions on the back of the paper are too difficult. The high achievers were shocked.
Essay question? On the back.
Watching the high-achieving students hurrying back to the examination room, Chris's face was calm. Chris to buy a light bulb. Selling blood from a hospital bed. At night Chris, by the faint light, finally fixed the evil scanner. His trembling fingers pressed the switch. In a crowded, stinking shelter, the bright light shone like hope. I got a good price for my nearly repaired scanner. The haze of years is gone. Looking at the smile on his young son's face, Chris had mixed feelings. They can finally stay in a hotel. The big clean bed was empty. Father and son were so tired that they fell asleep on the ground. The half-year internship is coming to an end. Chris was at peace. It's been 6 months of unimaginable hardship. He got through it with his teeth. I have a clear conscience after doing my best. A few days later, the leader asked Chris to come to the office for a talk. Even if there are expectations, he was suddenly a little nervous. Trembling, he took off his glasses and put on his coat. Shake hands with everyone as if nothing had happened. He sat down and joked about it.
Wear a shirt today. You know, being the last day and all.
Wear one tomorrow, though, okay? Because tomorrow's going to be your first day.
Unexpected surprise. Chris nodded subconsciously, trying to hold back the tears that were about to pour out. He could not hold back his tears as he turned to leave. The white-haired boss stopped him with a smile. Hand him $5. The goodness of Chris let him finally get the gift of fate. Bustling with people, Chris broke down in tears. He clapped with all his might. Even when you're sobbing. Happiness finally knocked at the door of his life. End of film. The happy father and son are strolling in the beautiful city streets, past a black man. He is the real model for the film. Chris Gardner. Life has its ups and downs. When you feel the way of life is hard, well, congratulations, it's an uphill climb.